Hello and welcome back to another session on Indian writing in English. We continue with our discussion, or we continue with our critical analysis of the theme of the play, one of the themes of the play, that is. So according to Carnad, the tales told in this play express a distinctly woman's understanding of the reality around her, the lived experience in a patriarchal society. So they are the perspectives of women, and that too from a patriarchal or from around a patriarchal society. So till now all folk tales were centered around men. All classical texts and structures were all centered around men. But here Carnad brings in women narrating their experiences, the lived reality. Thus, the stories of these flames are women's stories. So what are these stories about? The flames, Rani, and all. They are about men enjoying or exploiting women. How men use them to quench their thirst, how they are seen as an object of pleasure. And also, if you look at the old woman who refuses to pass on the story and the song, is also another type of exploitation. She's doing a big mistake because again, these folklores which are woven around this play Nagamandala are mostly about sexuality. So refusing to pass the story and the song, the woman is committing a big mistake. So when a story and song jumped out of her mouth and took the shape of a young female, and the song becomes a sari, and they are feminine. Okay, so it can be seen as an exploitation of young women by women. The story becomes young female, attractive females that can cause trouble in domestic heaven. For instance, if you look at the old woman and her husband, the husband did not know anything about this woman or this young woman rushing out of his bedroom, and thus she creates a big problem or a fight between the husband and wife. Now, who was this woman? She was none other than the suppressed folk tale, right? So you see that even the song becomes an object of woman's clothing, and you see that Carnad creates a gender. They are all gendered, and do remember that the playwright is also a male. So why doesn't the old woman pass on the story? If she refuses to pass on, the folklore stops. So what type of folklore are dealt in Nagamandala? These folklores are all about sexuality. Here also, if the old woman doesn't pass on this story, she is refusing to pass on the narratives of sexuality. Narratives of how women exploit young women or wives within this thread of Nagamandala. The story refusing to tell the tale which she knows. Not the story, the woman refusing to tell the tale or story which she knows. And Kurudava's advices on Rani all can be seen as exploitation of women on young women. So this is the general tone or theme. So when the old woman refuses to tell the story, she is refusing to pass on cultural knowledge or cultural identities which are associated with young women. And for that, the folklore is taking revenge on old women by causing trouble in their domestic life. So we need to understand this complexities of this particular world order. The story tells the man that he has to pass it on, right? You have to tell the story to others. You have to keep passing it. So what moral legitimacy do these stories tell us? What is the theme or the moral purpose of these stories? Especially in relation to gender, the identity and cultural function of women. Karnad himself tells us that these stories are from the perspectives of women against the patriarchal structures. So these stories unfold in minute detail the world of women in a patriarchal society, and these stories must go on. Like I told in the earlier video, according to Karnad, the status of a tale becomes akin to a daughter, for traditionally a daughter too is not meant to be kept at home for a long time, but has to be passed on. This identity adds poignant or ironic undertones to the relationship of the teller to the tales. That is, these tragedies, these sorrows have very disturbing ideas. And so Karnad can see parallels between these stories and daughters. Clear? So the stories, if you look at the stories told in Nagamandala itself, all the stories, the flame, the beat, all the stories that revolve around Nagamandala, you will find disturbing tales that are centered around women. So Karnad sees parallel between these stories and daughters. Both have to be passed on from one family to the other, from one old woman to a young woman, and from one young woman to a child and that female child to another, and so on. So stories are also to be passed on from stories are to be passed on from one to the other. These stories, however, are problematic too. These stories tell the hard tales, the hard realities of women in a patriarchal world. And most of these stories revolve around the ideas or functions of women, which are again social constructs. The ideas of women, the function of women, they are all social constructs. So let me come back to what I said in the previous video about this being children's literature. The women pass these culture, these identities, these sorrows, these woes of women to their children as bedtime stories, and they are interpolated to believe something that is a construct by the patriarchal society. The very idea to subjugate and control women, to exploit them and to use them to their will. So why do these stories need to go on? This question has to be answered. It is inevitable. When the old woman refuses to tell the tale, is she deliberately putting a stop to this kind of cycle of oppression? And for that, is she being revenged by story and song? Now, if you read the play very closely, on one hand, this is folklore passed on to us by generations or generations past, stories which cannot question the logic of these stories of magic and myths, of gods, these stories that cannot be questioned because they are beyond logic. But at the same time, according to Karnad, these stories tell the tales of women in a male-dominated social order. So if these stories tell the real practical realities then what is the relationship between these two? What is the purpose? What is the righteousness of passing on story from one generation to the other? Okay, this is something that you will have to ponder on. Let me put this and take you out from your comfort zone. Let me make you think a little. Okay, so I throw this question to you, and I want you to think about it. Now, if you look at the Act 1 of Nagamandala, you will find a striking parallel between Karnad's Hayavadana and Nagamandala. In Hayavadana too, the characters have no real name. The heroine is called Padmini, after one of the 6 types into which Vatsyayana classifies all women. Her husband is Devadatta, a formal mode of addressing a stranger. His friend is Kapila, simply the dark one. So likewise, the story asks for a name for the girl in the story in Nagamandala, and she says a young girl, her name, it doesn't matter. Likewise for Appanna, his name was, well, any common name will do, right? So then story goes about with those names. And Rani means queen, the apple of her parents' eyes. So these two figures in the story and the Naga that comes later in the play are types. They are archetypes. They are essential ideas. So it doesn't matter what their names are, which is again a slightly problematic one. And if the story and her ideas are problematic, what is hinted here is a notion that it is a universal tale. So if it is a universal truth or universal tale, should it even be passed on to the next generation? Universal truths and universal tales are for times and ages, right? Should it really matter that it has to be passed on? But this is a disturbing tale, and it captures the gender imbalance. Besides, even universal truths and tales are, I believe, social constructs, ideas, right? Is gender a universal truth? Is it a fact? Somebody created it, right? To name a man, and a woman, you study that in structuralism. Sorry, deconstruction and structuralism, of course, right? Language is indeed arbitrary. Again, gender, language is important, very powerful tool. Language is also a tool that can subjugate, right? So man over woman, gender. Thus the play showcases a particular set of axes of power in society without offering a solution. Karnad, however, does not state it directly, but it can allude to the subjugation of women by men by presenting their sufferings and woes, especially that of the Indian women in a patriarchal dominant society. Okay, so that's with one of the themes, few of the themes, not one, few of the themes of Nagamandala. One is sexuality, another one is about the folk tale and having akin to daughters, and which has to be passed on, and also of these folk tales, the nature of this, the very nature of these narratives, or the very nature of these folk tales. What do they hint at? Okay, so here it's thus you understand the technique that is used here. So through various interventions, through various folk tales, through magical realism, Karnad brings in an alienation effect that makes people move out or come out of their hot seat and start thinking about them, and they understand that it is more than a play. Okay? Now, we'll come back to Kurdava, and we'll come back to where the places where we stopped. She tells Kurdava tells Rani that Appanna often goes to visit that or the concubine or the prostitute, and Rani is stunned and shocked. And if you look at the language of Kurdava, it is pretty vulgar, right? And she's trying to find a solution to the fact that the husband is not doing his husbandly duties. So that is especially dealing with marriage or with consummating their marriage. So I also want you to turn to the section where Kurdava gives directions to Kappanna to get the roots which are kept secure, right? And turn to that section, please. Open your book and turn to that section where Kurdava asks Kappanna to get the root. So left corner, just above where you keep the plough, behind the pillar on the shelf. So Kappanna, again he repeats, behind the pillar on the shelf. Kurdava, there is an old tin trunk, take it down. It is full of odds and ends, but take out the bundle of cloth, untie it. Inside there's a wooden box, right? And inside the wooden box is a coconut shell wrapped in a piece of paper. Inside are 2 pieces of root. So the roots are secured in layer after layer of protection. These are 2 related ideas inherent here. Kurdava faces the same problem, which is more or less the same as what Rani faces at present. Both are unable to fulfill their sexual life. Kurdava is unable to find a husband. Rani gets a husband but is not able to consummate the marriage. So 2 similar issues. Thus the problem in the present can be solved only by going back to the past of Kurdava. And perhaps you can even go back further in time. Okay, so the idea is that the women's problems more or less fall within this particular domain, which can all be solved through similar solution. Grind the roots, make a paste, give it to the husband, and all is well. കൈവശം കൊടുക്കുക എന്നൊക്കെ പറയില്ലേ, അതേപോലെ തന്നെ തലയണ മന്ത്രം, കൈവശം കൊടുക്കുക. So Kurdava's past and Rani's present are not much different, and similar solutions are being offered to Rani. Okay, so we have critically analyzed up to that. Now let's read the play. We stopped here. Rani, but I am his wife already. Kurdava, just do as I say. Rani takes the piece. Kurdava tucks the other one in the knot of her sari. Kappanna whistles. She turns. That must be Appanna coming. Rani, running in. Go now, Kurdava, but come again. Kurdava, I shall too, but don't forget what I told you. Kurdava starts to go. Appanna crosses her. Appanna suspicious. Who is that? Kurdava? Kurdava, how are you, Appanna? It's been a long time. Appanna, what are you doing here? Kurdava, I heard you had brought a new bride. Thought I would talk to her, but she refuses to come out. So here Kurdava is lying so that Rani would be safe. Appanna, she won't talk to anyone. and no one need talk to her. Kurudava, if you say so. Exits. Aparna. So she can hear. I put a lock on the door so those with sight could see. Now what does one do with blind meddlers? I think I'll keep a watchdog. Opens the door and goes in. To Rani. I am lunching out today. I'll have my bath and go. Just heat up a glass of milk for me. Goes into the bathroom, mimes bathing. Rani boils the milk, pours it in a glass and starts to take it out. Notices the piece of root, stops, thinks, runs out, sees that he is still bathing, runs back into the kitchen, makes a paste of the root. Aparna, dressing. Milk. Rani jumps with fright, hurriedly mixes the paste into the milk, comes out and gives Aparna the glass of milk. He drinks it in a single gulp, hands the glass back to her, goes to the door, ready to put the lock on. She watches him intently. He tries to shut the door. Suddenly clutches his head, slides down to the floor, stretches out and goes to sleep on the doorstep, half inside, half outside the door. Rani is distraught, runs to him, shakes him. He doesn't wake up. He is in deep sleep. He tries to drag him into the house, but he is too heavy for her. She sits down and starts crying. Aparna, groggily, water, water. She brings a pot of water, splashes it on his face. He wakes up slowly, staggers up, washes his face, pushes her in, locks the door from outside, goes away. Rani watches, stunned, slowly goes back to her bedroom, starts talking to herself. It becomes night. Rani. So the demon locks her up in his castle. Then it rains for 7 days and 7 nights. It pours. The sea floods the city. The waters break down the doors of the castle. Then a big whale comes to Rani and says, "Come, Rani, let us go." She falls asleep. Midnight. Kapana enters carrying Kurudava, stumbles on a stone. They fall. So let's stop there. Okay, so what happens here is when Kurudava leaves, Aparna, who does not want anyone near his house or near Rani, comes. He doesn't like Kurudava, or he doesn't like, in fact, anybody near his house. And when he sees Kurudava, he's suspicious and he asks her what she's doing, what she was doing there. And he gets angry and tells her to leave. And Kurudava tells her that she had come because she heard that he got married and brought a bride. And however, Kurudava lies to Aparna just to keep Rani safe, just for the sake of Rani. She lies to Aparna, telling him that she refused to come out or refused to meet her. And Aparna says that's because she would not meet anybody and nobody need to meet her. And he says aloud, he speaks aside, he makes an aside and he speaks. He talks to the audience, he makes an aside. He plans to put a lock on the door so that the ones with sight could see. However, he doesn't know how to tackle blind meddlers like Kurudava, and therefore he thinks he should set up a watchdog in front of his house to chase such unwanted people like Kurudava. So it is clear that Aparna does not want Rani to come into contact with other people and to know more about him. That is, while he enjoys his extramarital sex, He does not allow her to enjoy even the affection of others. So he's a selfish man. It's not that she is doing the same thing that Aparna is doing. She is refused even the affection that she should get normally, or the affection of others, or even talking to people. Okay, he mercilessly keeps her starved of affection and love, which are in fact indispensable for growth and sustenance of the human mind. This confinement of Rani by Aparna in the house symbolizes the chastity belt of the Middle Ages. Now, what is chastity belt? Chastity belt is a locking item of clothing designed to prevent sexual intercourse. They may be used to protect the wearer from rape or temptation. So that's a chastity belt which was used during the Middle Ages. Okay, so here it symbolizes, this locking her in this room symbolizes the chastity belt of Middle Ages, the reduction of women's talents to housework, and the exclusion of women's talents from enlightenment and enjoyment. Later, he brings a watchdog to prevent people from talking to his wife. Okay, so that's one type of a man, this Aparna. Now, Aparna, when he comes back, he opens the door, he gets in, he tells Rani that he is lunching out that day. He also says that he will go and have his bath and then he will leave. And he asks her to boil a glass of milk for him. Aparna goes to the bathroom and takes bath. Rani boils the milk and she pours it in a glass and starts to take it out. And just then she remembers, or she's reminded of the piece of root given to her by Gurudeva. She thinks for a while and she runs to the bathroom and she finds Aparna still bathing. Okay, she runs back into the kitchen and makes a paste of the root. Aparna asks for milk as he's dressing, and Rani is, since she's doing it very discreetly, very secretly, she jumps with fright. She hurriedly mixes the paste of the root into the milk and gives it to Aparna. He drinks the glass of milk in a single gulp and returns the empty glass to Rani. Suddenly, what happens is something happens to him. He clutches his head and he becomes giddy and he slides down on the doorstep and he goes to sleep. Rani becomes distressed. She runs to him, shakes him, but he does not wake up. He is in a deep sleep. He tries to drag him into the house. She tries to drag him into the house, but he's too heavy for her. She sits down and starts crying helplessly. Aparna is half awake and he asks for water. Rani goes and brings a pot of water. She splashes it on his face. He wakes up slowly and staggers up. He washes his face and pushes Rani inside. He then locks the door from outside. He goes away like one who sleeps in his walk. Rani watches him go and she's again stunned. She does not know what to do. She slowly goes back to her bedroom and starts talking to herself as usual. She's in that fantasy, and she starts fantasizing. Soon it gets dark. She fancies about a demon locking up a beautiful princess in his castle. It rains for 7 days and 7 nights, and sea floods the city. The water breaks down and the door of the castle, and big whale comes to Rani and asks her to go with it. So this 7 nights, 7 days, it was already mentioned in the earlier, when we started the act in the fantasy of Rani, it was mentioned. Again it is spoken. So dream of Rani, where there is, in this dream, she sees a demon, and it metaphorically alludes to Appanna, who is the demon who has locked Rani in his house, the castle. As a reality, as reality is bitter for Rani, she begins to hallucinate and slips back into the world of dreams, where the suppressed emotions of her finds a release. Now, the veil symbolizes the motherly love and protection, for it is it is the veil who rescues her from the clutches of the demon. So in her dream you see a veil coming, and soon after this hallucination of Rani, Kurdava comes and assures her motherly protection, right? Okay, so we'll stop with that, and we'll continue the rest of the play in the next video. So thank you and keep safe.